Good day. Welcome to the DDP podcast channel. We really appreciate your support, and please don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you don't miss more of our episodes. Thank you.
This is another episode. I am joined by none other than the brilliant, gifted, and of course, a global leader, Xatyiswa Maqhashalala. Today, we're going to be discussing 30 years of democracy and leadership in South Africa. And knowing very well that we have been in a trajectory for transition since 1994, when we had our first elections and we came into the democratic dispensation. So today we're going to be looking into what it means in this country today. So Xatyiswa Maqhashalala, who is based in the United States, she's a PhD candidate in one of the leading institutions in the country. She will tell us more about what she's studying and how she's contributing to the body of knowledge, both for South Africa and the globe. So, Exi, hello, how are you?
Hello, Yolo. I am well, thanks. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this web podcast. We really appreciate your time as DDP. We know very well that you are very busy, very, very busy with your PhD, your work, your coaching, and also the fact that you're a lecturer in the United States. How amazing. So thank you so much for actually affording us this time, Exi.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here, and I was really honored when I received your email, and thank you so much. And we need these spaces, especially now. We are heading towards another election in South Africa, and we're also it's election year in the US, and we have seen how sometimes US politics can interfere with the rest of the world or can make an impact to the rest of the world. So it's actually an exciting time to be talking about these things.
Oh, well, great. Yes, actually, now the US is also going through an election, and the previous election also showed us a different side of what democracy could look like. Because knowing very well that countries in the West, including the USA, have been deemed as they're leading in democracy, but we saw people storming the Capitol Hill, and so we're looking forward to these elections and how they're going to turn out. Are you voting? Are you voting for it? Have you registered to vote for South Africa?
No, I have not. And the reason that I have not, I live in the Midwest, and as a South African, I would be able to vote if I was in Atlanta, I believe DC, and New York, where we have some of our offices. And it's very far for me to go, and it's during exam times for me. And so the logistics did not make sense. Otherwise, I would have really, really wanted to vote. I find these to be the most exciting elections in our time because the Gen Zs are voting this year. So I find this to be the most exciting time. I will talk shortly, just briefly about my family. I have a 21-year-old sister. She is a Gen Z. She is very vocal. She's graduating for her BCom in marketing. And my dad was in the struggle. He was at some point exiled to Mozambique. And so we have this conversation at home. And we have my mother who grew up in the rural areas, and she was a young mom. So in my house currently, there is this whole conversation that's happening between this Gen Z and a Gen X and somebody who actually went to exile. So I find this to be a very, very exciting time for our politics in South Africa.
Oh, I can imagine in your household, we have an entire intergenerational dialogue on politics. And actually, I was planning to ask you a question on when were you introduced to politics and maybe the idea of democracy, human rights. And I can imagine now if your father spent time in exile and your mother was a young mother as well, who's very vocal about her positionality. And now with your 21-year-old sister, who's very much vocal about the current state of affairs in South Africa. So your introduction to politics, I can assume it has very important to you.
Oh, yes. Excuse me. My introduction to politics or to democracy was actually in grade 1. This was after the Constitution of South Africa was created. Remember, it was done in 1996. So the Book of Constitution was published in 1996. The government at the time had the Book of Constitution delivered in public schools. I don't know if it was done throughout the country, but I remember when in 1997, when I was in grade 1, we were the first group, by the way, to be called grade 1. So in grade 1, they brought these books of constitutions to our schools. I've always been a talkative person, and we received these books at school, and they told us that this is and they brought the Bill of Rights. They brought the Constitution as well as the Bill of Rights that could be understood by children. And they told us these were our rights. I have always liked reading. I was taught to read by my grandfather's younger brother. My grandfather taught me how to read. Mind you, he left school in grade 2, I think. Yes, because he had to go to work. And his younger brother, who left school around grade 4, grade 5. So my grandfather taught me how to write. His younger brother taught me how to read. So by the time I went to school, I was already able to read. And we received these books of constitutions, and I read it, Yolo. Utiwa Ekaya, I used to carry that book everywhere. If someone dad yelled at me, okanye, I was hungry, or a child in my village, if a parent beat their children, I would always pull the book out. And I moved to Johannesburg the following year, 1998, as you know, that I was born with scoliosis. So because of the past, our country's past of apartheid, the Eastern Cape, a larger part of the Eastern Cape does not have good hospitals, and which actually is still the case to this day, sadly. And so my family had to make a decision for me to move to Johannesburg, where I could get the kind of hospital needs and doctors that I needed. Apparently, not apparently, I remember I traveled with this book of constitution, and I still used it everywhere. I went to school with it. And so that's how I was introduced to democracy, that there was a book that had my rights and that could protect me. And I then was introduced to Children's Day, which is it November or December? I cannot remember now because I've been an adult for about 16 years.
Yes.
Yes, it's in November. So I was in a boarding school for children with special needs. So Children's Day was a very big deal to that to that school. And so I was introduced to Children's Day, and during Children's Day, we were taught a whole lot more about our rights. And then I left boarding school and I went back to live with my parents. I was in boarding school for 2 years. I went back to live with my parents. And that was the first time I stayed with my father, because my parents met when I was 6 years old. And so now I'm introduced to living with my father. And as I am talking about these rights, he's now telling me about democracy. He's telling me about the fight, about the struggle, about how South Africa came to be where it is. I once wrote about this on Facebook, and my younger sister still jokes with me about this, how my own father would have me bunk school. I do not remember what triggered my dad to do this, but this one day I was getting ready to go to school, and he said, "Don't put on your uniform today. And I did not ask questions. I mean, I'm not going to school, yay. And as much as I love school, and we went to Johannesburg He took me to the museum at the Constitutional Hill, the Apartheid Museum. He took me to the art museum. He just took me to a lot of museums in Johannesburg in one day. And throughout all of them, he was just teaching me about the history of South Africa and how we got to where we are. And so my introduction started at a young age, and then it was further fueled or propelled by my dad. And then because I have a disability, I was bullied at school, but I was able to stand up for myself. And as a result, I was able to stand up for myself because one, I'm an extrovert. Two, I knew a lot about my rights. And three, I was very smart in class. And I noticed that most of my bullies were people who did not even do well in school. And so I could stand up for myself. But what that translated to was I then started standing up for my other schoolmates. And in grade 6, I ran for head girl in my primary school, and I got it. I was a head girl in grade 7. And during that time, I spent time with my principal, and even without knowing it, she mentored me. How do you bring such issues to light when there's something is happening in the background, in the playground? How do you bring it up to adults, in a safe manner? So I started getting my training very young. And then even when I went to high school, I was at some point an RCL, and I became a prefect in matric. And so during all of that time, and with my training at home, with my dad's training at home, and with me being socially active at school, and I got to learn a whole lot more about our democracy and about our freedom. And then my story of high school, of university.
Yes.
I got to university, and I remember I went to the University of Fort Hare. It was a culture shock for me because I grew up in Johannesburg, where we had an access to a lot of things. And so I get to the University of Fort Hare. First of all, this residence that I'm placed in does not have a ramp. I need to go up the stairs. And it was a matron that saw me, and she said, "No, I need to move you." Mrs. Toto said, "I must move you to the ground floor." And my initial thought was, this conversation shouldn't have had to happen in the first place. The university should have been accommodative to people who are different. Mrs. Toto did not have to go and talk to matron. I'm grateful she did that, but we shouldn't have a system where someone must make an adjustment for just one person, right? Because Mrs. Toto noticed that my disability was physical, so she could do something about that. And she was the RES manager at the time, so she could do that. But how about if my disability was not physical? Then I would have had to struggle, right? And so I noticed all of these things, like in the university, and I was frustrated. Then this one day, I was walking from class. I bumped into Xatyiswa, and he was reading a book about Ulili Ngui, and he said, "Hello, mntanam, ngubani igama lakho?" And we had a short conversation, and I just aired out my frustration, on him, and because he was telling me about the ANC Youth League, and I was like, "What are you guys doing?" Because here is the status quo right now. Here are the challenges that we have in this university right now. And he was like, "You know what?" Because he was very good at getting people to join politics. And he said, everything that you're saying is correct. So you should join us so that you can make these quarrels heard, so that you can make your voice heard. And I became friends with him and his friends, and that's how I ended up then in university. It was the first time that I became politically active. And my dad was very, very excited about this, especially because of his loyalty and the fact that he's been with the political party since before democracy. And so during university, I got to be politically active, but I quickly moved from politics to just social activity and just looking at what works for our students and how can I best serve the students outside the politics. And so I think at that time, through FES, I was introduced to a different kind of leadership, or that you do not need to be in politics in order to make the changes that need to occur in your space.
Oh, anyway, just to for our listeners to know that FES is the Frederick Ebert Stiftang. They had a leadership program focusing on social democracy and political economy. So Xatyiswa was part of that. Which class were you in?
I was in the class of 2014.
Oh, okay. See the oldies in FES. So they got it while it was still very hot. Well, yes, now this is quite interesting for me. Looking at how you were introduced to politics, and I love how your father made you rebel against the formal education system to actually teach you by himself on South African history, because I think sometimes many people have been complaining that the curriculum for particularly the foundation stages is quite still very westernized. I think things now are changing. So I think for you, you got the real deal because you were taught by someone who had practical experience as well. But I wanted to check, so even though you are not born in 94, but young people who are born post 90, from the 90s are deemed to be, what do you call this, the term, the born frees. Do you believe in the concept? Do you believe you are born free? The fact that you could speak your mind, and also even at university, you could challenge the status quo without fear or favor that you're going to be expelled. Is that a thing for you?
I believe it, as much as we can argue about whether or not we are free, right? And we can argue about the freedoms that we have and the accesses that we have. But I do believe that we who were born in the 90s or in the early 90s were born free, because as much as there are other freedoms that we do not have, for example, economic freedom, we do possess a freedom that those who were born before us did not have. You know how Freud says that a child is the formation of a child happens in the first 7 years of their lives. And so for us who were born in the early 90s, were before 7 years old in 1994. And so the term democracy, or the idea that we had freedom of movement, took place in our minds while we were still in the formation stage. So there is a part of us that truly lives in that we are free. So let me talk about how I have seen this freedom. For example, what I talked about early, having the Book of Constitution, that book, or that awareness, even those who were not my age mates, who might have not been reading the book or the Bill of Rights, we knew that there were certain things our parents could not do to us. This is also not to say abuse does not exist. We know it exists, but we live in a time where we know it is abuse, where we are aware, as much as sometimes, children do not have much power to fight against such things, but there is an awareness that exists within us. We know that we can talk. We know that we have a voice. We know that we have freedom of movement. We know that if we have certain needs, we can raise them. And this is what I have noticed. My family is also going through some kind of healing, a kind of healing in the sense that I'm going through therapy. My sister and I are talking about our challenges. My mother apologizes. She is a parent who apologizes. And so my family is going through the stage of being aware of the past, being aware of things that took place. And as we are going through this healing, I have noticed my mother is now raising two younger children, my aunt's younger children. One is 13, one is 9. And as she's doing this, I am realizing, Yolo, there are things that their generation did not have. They did not know that you can say no to an older person. They did not know that you could, an older person could apologize to you or should apologize to you. they did not know that you can, as a parent, you can take the side of your child where instead of the side of the teacher. My younger sister, the 7-year-old, my cousin, but I call her my sister, recently came home with a comment that a teacher had made, and my parents were up in arms. No, you cannot talk to like that to our child. And these are things that they didn't know earlier that they could have. And so yes, I do believe that we are born free in the sense that we are aware, or were aware of some of our freedoms. We were aware of some of the things that were mandatory for us to have. So as much as we might not have had them, but the first step is awareness. The first step is to know. And also the fact that we can have such conversations. Sometimes we would be in town and we would say something when a police officer is walking past or a white person is walking past, and an adult would say, no, don't say that. Because for them, in their mind, they still live in a time where they could get arrested or get beat up for saying that. But we knew that we can have such conversations. And I mean, you look at these podcasts, you look at TikTok and the kind of conversations that we are having. We are being honest about the history. I saw a TikTok recently where somebody posted a picture of their black nanny back in the 70s or the 80s. And the white people were commenting like, oh yeah, we had one. She was so good to us. But people were not backing down. They say, how can you praise such a time? And so that is a freedom that we have. And so that is why I believe that we are to a point, we are born free.
Yes, and I remember, I think earlier on we were talking about Malaika wa Azania of A, and I remember reading the book in 2014, actually. Also, Forte is my alma mater. Yes.
Memoirs
So
of
I
a
was
Born Free.
Yes, Memoirs of Born Free. And Malaika is trying to debunk this concept of born free, but also giving an illustration of the access that the democracy that we have today came with. The fact that we could go to good schools, private schools, schools that were previously put aside for certain races, and two, the fact that as much as parents are struggling but the fact that they can still choose where to stay, because during apartheid there was segregation on where you should stay. But if now you can afford, you can go and have a house in Bryanston.
Yes.
No one is going to actually challenge you to that. So yes, I think I do want to agree with you that born frees and really a thing. It's something that we've seen happen through the transition. Maybe there's still room for more. There's still room to improve the lives of Black people, to ensure good education, good access to healthcare. And I want to ask you, so you have said initially that when you moved from Eastern Cape and then you came to Johannesburg, it was mostly on the basis that your parents wanted access to good healthcare.
Yes.
Do you think things have improved now for people with the same condition as you? Can they still maybe reside in Eastern Cape and have access for good healthcare?
No, no, they can't. And the sad thing is that, like, going back to this born free thing, we do not have access, but what we do have is the fight, right? We have the ground to fight, which if you are not born free, then you did not have the ground to fight. However, no, Yolo, we do not have the facilities yet. And what is said is that this is what we are 30 years now into democracy, and it's still the case. I know that we do not have the facilities because whenever I write on Facebook or mention the disability, I get inboxes from people asking me, saying, Sisi, I live in East London, okanye I live in Mushwa, and umtanam is like this and like this and like this, and I have been told that I need to go to Pretoria, I need to go to Cape Town. My biggest problem is I don't know anyone in those places, and I have a job. And this is the same challenge that people, or like my aunts, because my mother was a teen mom, so she went back to school after she had me. So mine was more of for my aunts and my grandmother. This is the same challenge that they had, you know. We had to stay with relatives or a relative's friend. I remember at some point, kwakuko itichala that used to rent ekhaya ezilalini. And when she found out we needed a hospital, we went to stay with her sister, you know. So that's how it was. And unfortunately, that is how it still is. There are people who are inboxing me and saying, Sissy, my son needs medical attention. But the only hospitals that work on this are in Pretoria, in Pietermaritzburg, or in Cape Town. And I do not know anybody there. And not just from the Facebook. You'll remember that during the beginning of COVID and even after, I worked as Lalini in Mvenyane, in primary schools in Mvenyane. And during that time, I would see lines that are at the hospital on certain days that are going outside the yard. You would hear kuthiwe ulimele, but Matatiala, the Taylor Bequest Hospital cannot help them, or even the Gokstead Hospital can't help them, so they need to be moved to Pietermaritzburg. The saddest part is that I don't know if you know, but the former councillor of the Matatiala municipality, Umomelezi Mbedla, may his soul rest in peace, he recently passed, and he passed in a hospital in Pietermaritzburg. And he was moved from a hospital in Gokstead to the hospital in Pietermaritzburg. So that is still the case. That he did not have to go that far. We shouldn't have such issues. And then we also have state lines or provincial lines. Uba Matatiele is under this province, and so you can't go to this. And we have people who are saying, who have to fake documents. But actually, no, I live in Gokstead with my cousin because they want to have an access to a hospital in Pietermaritzburg because that one is closer than the hospital, than Isisilia Makiwane. And this is 30 years after democracy, and that is still the case. Accessibility. I worked in primary schools. There is no internet in the school. Principal, when he wants to do something, he must go up Mtabeni with his own internet, what do you call these, dongles, or they used to
router.
router, yeah. And so he has to do that because the school itself does not have the internet. Now you are expecting these children to be able to compete at university level with Ombali, who grew up in Joburg with their Wi-Fi at home. I had grade 7 students who did not know how to turn on a computer. Others had never seen. I would bring my laptop to school. Others had never seen a laptop with their naked eye. They'd seen it on TV. And then you expect these students to be able to apply online. That is where my idea changed, because I would hear from my aunt. Oh, my family is also quite very active. My oldest aunt is very active. She was a counselor in our villages, like in our region, our ward, actually, our ward. And she would tell me, umntana kaSibanibani ave hlakaniphile Xatyiswa, khawumncede angene university, like help him apply for university. And I would ask, like, why didn't you apply? Hi, Sisi, what? And then you discover, because they're not gonna say, that they did not apply because if you want to go to vets, you need to be able to know how to apply online. If you want to apply at roads, you need to apply to be able to apply online. And if you want to go to Forte, you need to have an application fee. You see, so the universities where you can fill out a physical or a hard copy, it needs to come with an application fee. And the universities where you can apply for free, you need to be able to use a computer. Now, how will that shape up? And so, yes, accessibility is still like really, really far behind in a lot of rural areas in South Africa, and I know this especially in the Eastern Cape.
Yes, and you know what? This reminds me of we had a summit at DDP a couple of weeks ago, and it was a political party summit. So we had a number of political organizations coming to discuss with community members on the issues that are facing South Africa. And the theme was on the triple threat challenges, poverty, unemployment, inequality as well. And now, for instance, in South Africa, we're speaking that we have access, and you put it succinctly that yes, the access is there, but Now, how do you then get to actually have real access? So if you don't have internet, how do we then get to ensure that you go to university? If you don't have money, you can't apply at Forte because you don't have the money. And now they are still left behind on the line because we can say we have free education for basic education. But if these people can't have access to internet, to universities, and probably some of them don't even have food, then what becomes of this democracy? How do we then tell people that this democracy is good for you?
And I think that is when we need to reframe or redefine what we talk about when we say democracy, or what we mean by freedom. And that is my dissertation is actually centered around that. How do we define these terms? Whose terms are these? And how did we get to these terms? And does Eurocentric democracy look the same in South Africa? And I mean, I'm doing a qualitative study, so I cannot hypothesize, but that's basically the question that I'm asking. Like, whose democracy are we using? Whose freedom are we using? And how are we defining democracy? And how are we defining freedom? And so I think, Yolo, that is where we need to reframe and redefine these terms. What does accessibility mean? If you corner, but I can't have it. Who is it accessible to?
Yeah. Well, actually, also as you're speaking about your dissertation, please do take us through what you're doing, your PhD study at what university are you at? I can't pronounce it. I see when you write up.
Okay, I'm in Kansas State University. I am with the leadership studies. It's called the Lynn and Staley School of Leadership Studies. So it's a leadership college. I am also within the same university and within the same department. I am a lecturer for leadership practice. It's an undergraduate course, and also the introduction to leadership concepts. I'm also doing a graduate certificate in conflict resolution. And so my dissertation is the impact, or the impact of colonialism as well as culture, colonization and culture in African leadership. The reason that I came, and I'll be honest with you, Yolo, when I came to this university to study leadership, I was a Mandela Washington Fellow. I was placed in this university, and I was really intrigued by the way they approach leadership. They approach leadership from community engagement, collaborative leadership, engaging unusual voices, and collective knowledge creation. And because, as you know, that my work was centered around communities, working with women, working with children, working with vulnerable youths, and in agriculture, like sustainable agriculture, which includes people. And so I came here for that. But as I was reading, I did not have a dissertation in mind, but I knew that I wanted to learn about collaborative and community engaged leadership. And as I was reading this material, I kept thinking to myself, hey, this concept would not work for my village. This concept would not work for South Africa. But as I was saying that, I was thinking, but this is the concept that has been imposed on South Africa. This is the leadership ideal, leadership definition that is imposed on South Africa. And I started asking myself, then if our cultures, and we are a high culture context as Africans, if our cultures mean so much to us, how is it then that we expect that leadership styles and democratic styles that come from Eurocentric and the West, which are very low context cultures, will work in our sphere? How can we expect, I mean, the leadership definitions or democratic styles that we've adopted were designed for the Eurocentric world, for the Western world? Then how can we, and they were our colonizers, they were our enslavers. So how can we then expect that a democracy that was defined to put us below is going to work for us? I found myself having some kind of empathy towards our African leaders. And no, I will never excuse corruption. I will never excuse that. But what I'm trying to say is these people, not only are they learning a different language in terms of a dialect, they must learn English, right? Because a lot of them
Yes.
grew up speaking Zulu or Tonga or whatever language, Lilanga. And now they must learn this English. Not only must they learn this English, but they must also learn the language in terms.
Against, because even now, the how we see democracy and how we see freedom and how we deem rights, we still use very much of European Western concepts. So do you think, are we working in reverse?
I think with the works of, I'm using decolonization as one of my theoretical frameworks for my research study. And then we have you who is working on that. We have people like Dr. Mlamu Lihlajwayo, we have, or Dr. Pedro Mzileni, and so many other people. And that's just in South Africa. We have other people like that in other countries. I'm currently working here with Chibuzo Azubike and these innocent Asoman from Cote d'Ivoire. And these are people who are starting on the basic ground. I recently watched a PhD defense by Dr. Innocent Asoman, who's from Cote d'Ivoire, and he starts leadership practice from the university level, you know. And I think that we sometimes we want to start far at the ANC level or at the EFF level, you know. But the truth is, those people are coming from universities and they're coming from high schools. By the time we get to that level that I'm talking about, we are now adopting the policies of this political party that we're joining, or of this leadership forum that we're joining. But if we start at the university level, then by the time we join the structures, we are coming with a decolonized mindset or a decolonization mindset. And so I believe that, Yolo, as much as on of our colonizers, especially, I mean, we look at our constitution. It was done or written in 1996, but so much of it was borrowed from the apartheid constitution, except what was changed was the movement and asset management of Black people, right? And so at the AU level, we are still at the at the colonizers' mercy. But I think that those who are in universities right now, the people who are in universities right now, the people who are starting their work are working towards decolonization. And I think that we are not moving forward. We are moving the needle slowly, but we are moving it.
Well, so now when you are speaking that, when you're saying that people in universities, I could imagine, the group that is usually referred to as the Black intelligentsia, people like Dr. Lwazi Lushaba, Professor Gatweni, and I don't see as just people as scholars, but we see them as leaders in society because they shape the narrative, right? And also now maybe leading to how they can influence policy in government and maybe serve government as consultants or advisors to our leaders. So how can leadership, maybe good leadership from academia, from business, from society, from your community, people like your father, your parents, your family, how can we use that leadership to actually propel democracy forward, and probably how we reimagine democracy?
I think starting with scholars, and you might, I don't know how you would feel about this, but I've noticed that a lot of scholarship is very island-like, very elitist. I have seen some of the papers I read, even at my level, sometimes I'm not understanding what you mean, except if I am in your field. And so we need to make scholarship accessible. And by accessible, I'm not saying we need to bring everybody to university, because not everybody is interested in that. But we need to make sure that our publications can be understood by a child in grade 10. We need to make sure that our publications can be understood by our fathers, our mothers, our aunts who did not see the doors of university or even the doors of high school to begin with. We need to get to a point where we are able to explain our PhD dissertations to our grandmothers who left school in sub B in 1952. We need to be able to do that, to make scholarship accessible. And the reason why we need to make scholarship accessible is because scholars are the ones who are understanding things like frameworks like decolonization, right? And or Pan-Africanism. They're the ones who understand it. And so they need to make sure it's accessible to everybody else and not that it just stays within our seminars and our conferences and our publications. We need to make sure that scholarship is not just for scholars. It needs to be for everybody. And I think that's where we scholars can start. We need to move towards a community engaged leadership, collective knowledge creation, so that this knowledge does not look like Hegandlozi, so that it looks like it's ours. And when people know that this is ours, people are willing to give their entire lives for it. And this is why the ANC has been so strong. Its membership has been so loyal because people do not just believe in the person in Ramaphosa, for example. No, because they believe that they created the ANC, right? They believe that they were part of the shifting from apartheid. They were part of it. So for some people, for them, voting for the ANC isn't about what ANC will do. It's ours. ANC has a kai. Those are some of the words that my aunt will use. ANC even. So I'm one of those people. When I go to the rural areas, I sit with everybody. I will go and I will sit on the ground, and you hear people who will say ANC alapekai or Ramaphosa alapekai. And I mean, these are people who've never even listened to a full speech by this person, because collective knowledge creation makes us feel like we are part of the process. And therefore, when it grows, we grow with it. And so I think that's one of the things that needs to happen. We need to make sure that we engage in collaboration, community collaboration, collaborate with everybody from every level. Idea, you do not just reach out to X because she's Leonard Oganye, because you were with her with FES or she's part of your Yali group. No, you reach out even to that guy or Sengayo or Lusayo Elalin. You include him in the conversation, so that everybody
who have gone to universities have now been tend to be at least elites of sort, and people who did not go to school are deemed as if they cannot think and maybe intellectualize. And it's something that we've seen in history, that many of the changes that have happened, it's people who were in their communities. For instance, Chief Makoma of the Xhosa, we don't have history that he has gone to university, but the work that he has done in fighting against. Yeah, so we need to move away from the idea that education and intellect can only exist in the confines of university. And also this thing, it reminds me of many, I think the Fees Must Fall movement. During the Fees Must Fall movement, when students were also writing on how the education can be financed, right? And later we learned that in that document, the Fees Must Fall leaders were writing on, penning down on how finances would go. They also included communities, saying that community members, they need to be part of the university. They should not see the university as something that is far from the from the community. So they should access the university anytime. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Because you went to Forte as well. You see how people from the rest of the Alice town would see the university as as not necessarily something they could benefit from, or is something that they can contribute in making better, or maybe to comment on the proceedings of the institution?
I give you the university that I'm in right now, Kansas State University. It's called the Land Grant University. There are few land grant universities in America. They are called land grant universities because it is the community that gave this land. Okay, never mind get the fact that the university is on stolen land, on Native American stolen land. That is a conversation that the
What does that
university is having. The land, Kansas comes from the word Konza. So the Konza people, the native Konza people used to live here before they were driven off. And so the community of Kansas is the one that gave this part of the land and said it will be a university. So the university did not pay for this land. It belonged, and then the builders of the universities were community members. As such, the fees were lower for their students. It accepted, so land grant universities are some of the first that accepted Black people because the story of slavery in this country. And so, and land grant universities offer more scholarships, that kind of thing. And then, because I'm in a leadership department, we are responsible for having community dialogues. My department is responsible to work with the university president to have community dialogues. Some of them we call front porch dialogues, where we go to a community and we ask, what's up? And they will be hosted at someone's front porch, and we ask what's up, and communities will say that, you know what, we do not like the swimming pool. I know, okay, so the challenges are a bit different from back home, but because it's a more developed country. But people will say, well, we don't like the fact that we have this, and we don't have this. And then they will have an opportunity. And because the university is independent of the politics, the university or whoever is leading, one of my colleagues was leading the conversations in this past year, and one of my professors, Professor Colleen Lind. And so they then write a paper which they will then deliver to the governor of the state, or to the mayor of the city, because it is independent of the politics. So they're able to say, here we are. And so the university works with the mayor for policy advancement and policy reviews, and so I loved the idea of a land grant university, and how we are a very big agricultural university, and our graduate students, our animal science graduates, they work with local farmers. And we have a veterinary medicine school here in the university, and people from the community can bring their dogs they're operated in this university. And so the university literally works with the community, and people will fight you foot and what do they call, tooth and nail for this university. They support the sports because it is theirs. They take it as theirs. And I think that is a concept that I would really, really love for some of our universities, especially the University of Fort Hare, because, to be honest, University of Fort Hare is very big in Alice, and it brings in brilliant minds that can help to develop Alice to begin with. There's no way Alice yainjeyana ngo-1950, it is still like this in 2024, and yet we have had brilliant minds come and go. We should have left Alice better than we had found it.
That's very true. And I love the fact that you are quite clear on the idea that the land that the university has been established at was a stolen land. And also it also signifies that you take the land question very seriously. And with your background in agriculture, and I think at some point you have been a bit vocal about what land means, and also having stayed in the Eastern Cape for some time, you understand what people activating, working on the land for agricultural purposes, but also for dwelling. But what do you think about the land question? Because sometimes people, when you speak about land, they're like, what are you going to do with it? I mean now everyone is moving to the urban areas. So why do you think you need the land? You don't even have a garden in your space. So why do you think that now, if government would take back the land that was stolen from us, then it will be useless. It will be a waste because you don't use land. So what's your take on the land question?
Land is freedom, Yolo. Land is everything. Land is everything. And at some point in my life, when I was younger, I had that idea too that, oh, we get back the land and then what? And a lot of my thought was coming from how there are some people who actually got land, even in Matatiel, I think around those areas, they got land and they did nothing with it. And before that, those who had stolen our land had employees, right? And so there were people who were benefiting. And then we took the land, and then we laid off people because we were losing money. We did not know how to manage our finances or our businesses. And this is where I appreciate, I spoke about the ANC earlier and what it has done. And now I'm going to just say, I do appreciate what the EFF, how the EFF talks about land.
Yes.
And no matter what we can say, land is power. Land is freedom. We cannot, I do not believe that we can say that we are free if we do not have land, because land is where our economics come from. Land is where our food comes from. Let's look at, and if we are going to say the other people are better managers of the land, let's look at the maize triangle, Free State, Northwest Mpumalanga. That land has been used for agricultural purposes for many, many years by a certain group of people. And right now it has degraded so badly that even production has lowered because land, their practices. One of the other things we need to be honest about is how the Western or Eurocentric views are very profit-oriented, very capitalist. And so even the practice have destroyed our land, whereas Africans in their indigeneity work very well with nature, if I may say. I do not have a good background of this knowledge, but I know it even from home. There are years that they will say, let's let the land rest. Without technology, they knew how to make sure that the land continues to be in a good space, right? In good standing, and that it can take care, because they had nothing else. They did not have an Australia or a Europe to go back to. So they knew they had to take care of the land. So this is just me declaring that we are not a dumb people. We are not a stupid people. We are not a people who do not know how to manage land. We managed this land for many, many centuries before they arrived. And so on that basis, we are very intelligent people. Now, secondly, there are mistakes that have been made when some of these youths or some of us got the land. But then it goes back to my idea of collaborations and collaborative leadership. By nature, as abantu, singabantu babantu, we do not work in silos. We do not work alone. And so for these things to work, we need to be more collaborative. I believe that if we were to get our land and work collaboratively, we would be able to do well. We've got people now who went to university who know or who've learned about land management. We have people who are understanding environmental factors and how the environment is changing and all of that. I forgot what the term is called when like the climate change. Yes, we understand climate change.
Yes.
We have some of our friends who've been attending these things like the climate change, the global climate change forums and all of that. We have those people. We have people who are excelling in businesses, who know how to run businesses. And we have people who know how to manage land, who have never been to university, or who know exactly what plants need, or, and we've got human resources. We've got a lot of people who are available to work on these lands. And so if we were, and this is why this decolonization study is important, Yolo, because I feel like in our seeking of this land, some of us are approaching it in the Western or Eurocentric way. We are approaching it as individuals. Uba mna mandifumane umhlaba, ndizofumana imali. But if we were to work at it as Africans, as Abantu, and work at it the way that Abantu used to work at it, then we would definitely win. Umzekelo, and this is a small example, and someone might say, oh, but then that's just 5 women. Elalini, we hardly have 3 people abazawutyala imbotyi during the same year in their garden. So we will have like 3 people abazawutyala imbotyi, and they talk. My grandmother and her friends will talk. Okanye not even ngabantu endenabo because abaselalini. But ubucinga ukutyala ntoni this year? What are you planning to plant this year? And then a person will say, I'm thinking of umbona. And then another one, maize. And then another one will say, oh, I'm thinking of beans. And during harvest, they know exactly. My grandmother will say, oh, uMasikhosana akatyalanga kulo nyaka. And we will send a dish to uMasikhosana. And uMasikhosana obetyale imbotyi okanye uMamthembu obetyale imbotyi will say, uNakagcibane akatyalanga kulo nyaka. Akanazo imbotyi kulo nyaka. And they will send 20-liter buckets of imbotyi. And that is as a practice. If we can magnify that practice, and I mean, obviously we won't be sharing maize or oranges, but we would share what we are able of, we would share knowledge, because right now our biggest resource is knowledge. And so we would share that knowledge. Right now we know how to do exports. We know how those things work. And I think, and yes, Yolo, yes, we will make mistakes. We will make mistakes, but that's what adaptive leadership is. It is about one of the concepts I've learned over the past 2 years is the concept of the circle. We observe, and once we've observed, we make interpretations, and after the interpretations, then we intervene. And if our intervention or had gaps, then we go back again and we observe and we interpret, we make interventions. Adaptive leadership is about making mistakes and learning from those mistakes and working at it again. And so we can't look at the people who were given land in 2012 who have failed, or who bought Range Rovers and bought big houses, and then after that they lost the money after 5 years, and then we say it's not working. No, we can't base our entire future on the failures of 5 or 6 people who did not know how to do this.
Yes, and I mean this land question has also brought so many fights and sometimes even in discussions, what we would call intellectual discussions at universities or in community levels. I remember at one point the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries had engagement with communities. Some people wanted money to be compensated because they've moved from their households, they were forcefully moved. And then others were like, we really want the land, we want to work the land. And even issues now would come up. And I remember when I was growing up, my grandfather knew very well how to plow the land, what to plow, looking at the seasons, the type of the soil type. He knew those things, but he never went to formal school. And even when he was working emasimini in the field, he would come back between 12 and 1 when the sun is really up, and he will rest, and then in the afternoon he goes back. So he knew the fundamental things that any farmer should know. He knew how to irrigate, the lay of the land as well. So those things are things that you learn as you do. I do not think that people now in South Africa, particularly Black people, should be punished for not having gone to school for them to access land that was stolen from them. I think it's sometimes I would say it's absurd that we should have that question. But I guess it's we are probably going to learn, and then later on we are going to be able to practice what you call as collective and collaborative but yes, when people work together. And also this brings me to, when President Thabo Mbeki was still in power, he's still known for that speech he did in Parliament, African, and many people were resonating with that. And I remember when he was in power, he spoke about national identity, right? Saying that in South Africa, we need to build national identity. We did not have. And many years later, I'm not sure if it's 9 years or 20, 15 years now since Mbiki's time, we still are struggling, we're still scraping the ground for what we would call as national identity. How do we ensure that we have one national identity as South Africa that has 11, 12 languages, that now has a middle class, that has people who have access to great stuff, and there's people who don't have, who are basic, who are making ends meet. Yes, they are struggling to make ends meet, and there are those who have access to the most elite and luxurious life in South Africa.
That is a big question that I am still asking myself. And as a foreigner, it's easier for me to respond to it than I would have if I lived in South Africa, because now that I'm in a foreign country, I am able to remember what it is to be a South African. I recently, I think it was last year, I met with a white South African. He is Afrikaner. And we were so happy to see each other. And the first thing he asked me is, when last did you eat biltong? And he brought me biltong, and we had so much in common. But I know that if we were in South Africa, we wouldn't have so much in common, right? And so it is, and now I've met other South Africans. It becomes so weird when you're in a foreign country. Recently, a friend of mine told me, there's a South African who's coming and I've given him your number. I said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. It's different when you're a foreigner. And so I think that my response to this would be a bit biased, and it would be from a desperate, lonely frame or positionality, because I am so desperate for South Africa to be one, because I'm far. I am the only Black South African in this university right now. So I can identify with any South African from any level, because right now, here, I am not Xhosa, I'm not from the Eastern Cape, I'm not from a middle-class family. I am just South African. But, I will commend South Africa. I'm also part of the African Student Union. And even those who are from the same countries, and there are many maybe from the same country, they are still so divided. They divided between Yoruba and Igbo and Hausa. They divided between Shona and Ndebele, but in South Africa, we do not have that. And I almost said yet, but then that would mean I'm still anticipating a time where we will define ourselves more by being Xhosa and Zulu. And I know we take pride, and that's the difference. In South Africa, we take pride in being Xhosa, but we do not make it differentiate us from the Zulus or the Sothos, right? We do not use it as I don't know how to. You help me with words.
Yes, I see.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm saying we don't use our ethnic groups as our major identities or primary identity.
Or as a weapon,
Yes.
Or as I am better than, or and I think I would love to commend South Africans for that. As much as we take a big pride in being Tswana or Zulu or Tsonga, but we still do not use that against each other, as I have watched it happen in other countries that I've visited and within the community that I live in now of Africans. So well done, South Africans. Now, secondly, we have a very new country in terms of independence and democracy. And maybe that's where we can start from, the going back to, we have a shared history. Some people will say you will not know where you are going if you do not know where you come from. And maybe that can be our starting point, that we are starting bruised, we are starting hurt. We started bruised, we started hurt. We all started from a point of, as much as there were people who were doctors and teachers even back then, and business owners who were Black even back then, who were at a different financial or social level than others. Abanye bantu, I know there was a time when coming from ifemeli iyomfundisi differentiated you from the rest of the community. And yes, that existed, but we still were fighting the same fight. And so we need to ask ourselves, one person once said that the ANC had the plan to get us into democracy, but it seems like it did not have a plan to carry us through democracy. And so I think that one of the things that we need to do, and I might be mistaken because I'm in a foreign country right now, but it's to start with, we have a shared past. And think about when we were fighting for that freedom, where is it that we were planning to go? That's a shared goal. We need to find our common goal, our shared goal, and our common desire. And I mean, I think that even if we are in different social levels, that would still be the same. It is to see our country developed. It is to see our people free, truly free, economically, socially, you know, that's a common desire for all of us. Because the truth is, no matter how rich you are, for as long as there are poor people in your country, you will never be free because you are a target for the poor. For as long, no matter how healthy and how spiritually well you are, for as long as your country still have people who are on drugs or who are disabled, you will never be free. Because their mental status or their poverty or their drug addiction will always affect you. It will affect your taxes. It will affect the spaces you are able to move. There are places where you are told, don't drive there at night. Imagine you have all of your money and all of your nice cars and all of your security, but you cannot go visit your favorite uncle in his township because these divides exist. And so are you free then? No, you do not have the freedom of movement because let's be honest, Ubumnandi is found in the township. Like, I don't care. I've grooved in both the township and the cities. And you know what? True, joy is found in the townships and in the rural areas. And so if you cannot be free there where you are where you can have your social liberation, then are you truly free? And so I think we do have a collective desire, a collective vision. We just need to talk about it and be honest about it. When we were fighting for freedom, what were we fighting for?
Jeez. Oh, that's a very important question. Very profound. Because I can imagine and now that we are going to elections and people are saying, these politicians now are coming to visit us, but meanwhile, when you call the police van to come rescue, when we have incidents of crime, they never do. But when we have protests, they never do. But now, because we are heading towards elections, the campaigns are high up. They are not even scared to go to the most dangerous of places because they're campaigning. They're campaigning for the elections. And as much as you did say that you will be unable to vote due to circumstances because you are in a different state, but I do want your opinion on the national and provincial elections that are coming up. Some people have termed them to be like, this is going to be a watershed moment. There's new political organizations. There is independent candidates. We had a change in the Electoral Act. So there's a lot of things that are going on, and we have 3 ballots. We no longer have 2, have 3 ballots.
Whoa, and yes. I don't think that even as we go into the election, that these are things that we need to take for granted.
Yeah, that's very true, Exi. Actually, we are way over time, but I speak to you every day, every other minute. It's always great hearing from you. And also, we would like to thank you as DDP for actually making time for us, because I know it's not so easy to make time, particularly when you also have students who will send you such emails that they're going to see their significant partners. It's good.
when you're a lecturer in the Gen Z generation, Gen Z period, you should. I guess now you are forced into flexibility. I guess.
Oh,
Thank you so
yes,
much.
definitely.
Yes, it's been amazing having you. I'm looking forward to us writing that paper and publishing.
Yes,
And
yes.
yes, and I hope this conversation is going to continue as well.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Hence, I was also not aware of time. Thank you for considering me for this, and I really appreciate you. I love the work that you do. I'm a big, big fan of yours. Um, Yolo and I met back in varsity. Thank you so much, Yolo. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much, Exie. Well, thank you so much for listening. It's been amazing. Please check out the next episode of DDP Podcast with Yolokazi Mfuto. Have a great day. Goodbye. Okay, let me record.